Hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today I want to talk about Palpatine and how Rise of Skywalker has changed my entire view about the events of this entire saga, for better or worse. Now we're not going to have too many major spoilers from Rise of Skywalker in this video, aside from some of the things you probably already have seen in the trailer. So if you haven't seen the trailer, I recommend you not see this if you don't want to be spoiled, but I think most of you have seen the trailer already. So when I first saw Palpatine hanging there from that giant machine all nonchalantly, like everything was going according to plan, it clicked for me. Everything was going according to plan. How can Palpatine be so brilliant and cunning during his takeover of the Republic, his orchestration of the Clone Wars, and then just let it all go to hell during his rule of the Galactic Empire? How many terrible decisions did he have to make during the original trilogy to allow the rebellion win? That's so uncharacteristic of him. No, seriously, let's think about this. Order 66 was the most successful mass execution of Jedi in the history of the Republic. There had been previous purges before, but for tens of thousands of years, the Sith and Jedi have battled each other, and no one's gotten even close to what Palpatine's managed to do in this one period of time. There were perhaps only a dozen or so individuals who made it out of Order 66 alive. And the reason why Palpatine was able to do this was that the Jedi never even knew they were slowly being maneuvered right into the paths of their clone troopers' blasters. Every great Sith has had some other kind of skill that was non-force related that helped give them an edge. For Palpatine, it was simple. He was a great manipulator of people, aka a crafty politician. To an outsider, he was a humble and honest man who lived a quiet and minimalistic life. The only thing that adorned his office were 4 statues of the philosophers of Duarte, early lawmakers who had basically written the Galactic Constitution. Ultimately, Palpatine understood the inner workings of the Galactic Republic better than any other politician, Sith Lord, or Jedi Master. What made him so dangerous was the fact that he tricked the galaxy into thinking that he was a true believer of the Republic.
I love democracy.
But in fact, he was a cynic without an ounce of morality in his soul. As any cynic would probably say, it doesn't matter if the galaxy is ruled by a democracy or a dictatorship. What matters is how that government affects each individual citizen on a daily basis. Palpatine's favorite Duarte philosopher was Cicero, who in many ways was like the Machiavelli of Star Wars. Cicero believed that the ends justified the means, and populism was one of the best tools to gain power. And so Palpatine adopted that mentality and created a platform for democracy that he never really believed in. He played a long game and quickly grabbed control of the entire Republic. And that's where the audience thought his plan had come to fruition. But that's not where it all ended, because take a look at the Galactic Empire. It basically breaks every rule of good nation building. Palpatine, more than anyone, knew that in order to keep power, he needed to maintain the confidence of the people. Instead, he focused on creating a massive military, nationalized industries, and ran the labor force of the galaxy like a slave camp. By destroying this carefully balanced economy of the Republic and all of its supply chains, what Palpatine was doing was not sustainable. And while in the past I would have suggested that maybe Palpatine had gone senile, or maybe he had just become paranoid by some unknown threats, maybe the damage from the Sith lightning reflected back into his face had caused him to lose his mind, but the more I think about it, especially after seeing Rise of Skywalker, the more I realize again this was all a part of his plan. So why do this? Why put the Empire on an unsustainable path to the future? Well, first, was Palpatine's victory complete at the end of Episode 3? I would argue no. While the Jedi Order was severely damaged, it hadn't been completely destroyed. And perhaps equally as important, Anakin Skywalker, the vessel of pure force and malice that Palpatine had created, was damaged beyond repair. You see, Palpatine's master Darth Plagueis was the last Sith to be a part of the Rule of Two. The Rule of Two had set the foundation for everything we see in the main Skywalker saga. Darth Bane had been the first to realize the major problem with the Sith. Far too many of their number had been focused on physical victories based on the amount of enemies they killed and worlds they took. Ultimately, the Sith were better fighters than the Jedi, but they fell apart during peace and were completely unable to rule. They would either turn on each other or act so harshly to their populace that the populace would rise up against them. Bane understood that when you had a bunch of Sith running around, they would ultimately destroy each other. Bane took the Sith Order into the shadows and decided that the Sith would slowly build their strength, one apprentice and one master at a time. When the apprentice becomes stronger than the master, he challenges the master, and if he is able to defeat him in a duel, the apprentice becomes the master. What made Darth Plagueis different is he didn't want to be replaced by his apprentice. Instead, he wanted to rule side by side with his apprentice. He believed that the apprentice and master could share power and sustain each other through the Force indefinitely. But Palpatine wasn't interested in this. He saw Darth Plagueis as a weak individual, someone who was obsessed and terrified with death. And so he ended his master's plan and he hatched his own new plan, the creation of the Chosen One. When Palpatine and Plagueis were together, they were able to create life from the Force, which was an extremely tough thing to do. It was considered a perversion so great that it knocked the balance of the Force out of line. Using that same power, Palpatine created Anakin Skywalker by impregnating Shmi Skywalker. Anakin was supposed to be the most powerful Force user ever created. But then the unthinkable happened. Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to destroy Anakin's body. You see, when Anakin lost all those limbs and skin and vital organs, he was severely weakened as well. His body had more or less become useless, and a great deal of his power was now used to sustain his own life and stave off all of that pain. At the same time, Palpatine had also suffered some severe damage when Mace Windu had reflected his Sith lightning back into his own face. Sith lightning is not just energy, it's dark energy that corrodes and corrupts the flesh. Palpatine's body is also failing. So, let me set the stage. At the end of episode 3, the Sith have won, but their bodies both lie in ruins. So now we're going to have a spoiler from Rise of Skywalker, so skip ahead like 20 seconds if you want to miss it. Basically, Palpatine's entire goal in Rise of Skywalker is to make his body whole again, in a very Voldemort type of way. He initially wanted Rey or Kylo to strike him down so that he could possess their bodies. You see, the Sith are unable to become Force ghosts. They are not in tune with the Force at all. They're doing the exact opposite. They could, however, forcibly possess either an object or other beings. This has happened quite a lot in Legends. I believe the reason he created Anakin in the first place was so that he could take over his body eventually, but ultimately his body got damaged, so he didn't want it anymore. Palpatine didn't believe in the rule of two, he believed in the rule of one. And Darth Maul and Darth Tyrannus and Darth Vader were just tools for him to play around with. He never really wanted or needed an apprentice. This is why he would create organizations like the Inquisitors, or try to create Force-sensitive stormtroopers. And so with his plan derailed, he needed to wait a while longer for someone else to come along, someone who had a significant amount of Force power, which came in the form of Luke Skywalker. Now look at the throne room scene with Palpatine and Luke during the Battle of Endor. Palpatine literally gives Luke his lightsaber and tells him to kill him. It's uncertain that Palpatine would be able to stop Luke if he decided to do so. So he was willing to die. Spoilers for Rise of Skywalker for the next 20 seconds again. In Rise of Skywalker, he does the same exact thing for Rey, and he goads her into killing him so that he can possess her very powerful body. His ultimate goal was immortality, and everything from Legends and canon points to this. Now, let's get back to the economy and why Palpatine purposely tanks the economy and ruins everything with a kind of total war approach. Well, in history, nations have only gone in total war mode when literally the survival of the nation is at stake. Look at the Soviet Union during Operation Barbarossa when Germany quickly took over a huge portion of Eastern Russia. The Soviets burned their crops, dismantled their factories, and they basically made sure that the Germans had nothing they could use once they retreated. Now, this is an extreme gamble that is only taken when failure means losing your entire nation. The Empire faced no such great threats. It went into total war mode during peacetime, and Palpatine is too smart to have done this by accident. For one, total war weakens the economy, it destroys jobs, and that ultimately leads to dissent. The dissent led to the destruction of Alderaan, in many ways the catalyst for the Galactic Civil War. And it's pretty doubtful that the galaxy would have actually risen up against the Empire without it. Blowing up Alderaan is definitely not Palpatine's style, that is Moff Tarkin's style and his doctrine. Palpatine is much more likely to use a false flag attack. So many Imperials would end up questioning their allegiance to the Empire after the destruction of this culturally and historically significant planet. And many more normal citizens would also join the rebellion, turning it from nothing into a true threat. Palpatine would then encourage Tarkin and Krennic and Thrawn to fight each other by letting them share resources. I mean, this was clearly designed to weaken the Empire. There's no other reason why he would do this. Unless, that is, Palpatine realized that he needed to destroy the Empire. And that's because the execution of the Jedi Purge and takeover was incomplete. He hadn't truly destroyed the Republic and the Jedi that represented them. The Senate wasn't destroyed, it was slowly phased out. The Republic wasn't destroyed, it was slowly painted over. The alliance to restore the Republic was mainly made up of individuals who had been alive during the Republic period. The Emperor's rise was actually very gradual and seamless and bloodless, and so the enemies of Palpatine were always still there. Palpatine, who was always 5 steps ahead of everyone else, realized that in order to destroy the rebellion and all the rebels, all he really needed to do was to let them destroy themselves. Palpatine remembered how easy it was to take apart the old Republic, and he also understood how easy it would be to take apart the New Republic. As a matter of fact, it'd be easier to take over the New Republic because it was created during a war and politics is messy. The Rebel Alliance was made from countless different factions, all with their own goals. They were only united by their shared hatred of the Empire. Once that hatred was gone, they would inevitably turn back into chaos and infighting, this time as senators within the New Republic. I mean, such was the nature of human beings. Nations are designed to rise and then fall. They cannot be sustained indefinitely. We are not a species that fares well during peace and stagnation. Palpatine let the New Republic rise, just like he let the Empire fall. He let Mon Mothma become the Chancellor, and when she stepped down and there was a void in that leadership, the New Republic turned back to the old Republic ways. There was all sorts of partisan fighting and also bureaucratic gridlock. Nothing was getting done. We covered in depth what happened to the New Republic up until Hazian Prime. For the most part, this government did a terrible job at delivering the promise it had made when it won the war. The Outer Rim was still ruled by criminals and pirates, and the economy had never truly recovered. And for almost 30 years, the New Republic would basically make life more difficult for the citizens of the galaxy. So much so that some of them became nostalgic for the Empire. And that was the point, because the New Republic was incompetent, and it wasn't just their fault. Rebels, historically, make terrible rulers. And what's interesting is that when Hazian Prime was destroyed, the reaction was far more subdued than when Alderaan was destroyed. As a matter of fact, many people just shrugged and said, so what? Or were even happy that it happened. The New Republic was definitely not loved. It was hated by a lot of people, and Hazian Prime was nowhere near as special and significant as Coruscant or Alderaan. And not only did the First Order wipe out the entire New Republic government and fleet, it also simultaneously went after every former Rebel Alliance member and any other dissident who was known to have anti-First Order feelings, including former Imperials. This is very different from the gradual takeover of the Empire. The First Order overnight efficiently destroyed the entire potential resistance network. They had no one that they could recruit from. And so when the resistance is at their lowest point during the Battle of Crait, none of their allies were able to come. They were either too afraid or on the run or already locked up. This again is thoroughly covered in the books and comics, and it shows us just how effective Palpatine is this second time around. So let's go back to the whole economy thing. Why does Palpatine go into total war mode? Well, simply because he did need a massive fleet. See, Palpatine never really wanted to rule over this republic, which is exactly what the Empire was. Even though the Galactic Empire was seen as a separate government, there were still plenty of pro-Republic worlds that didn't really fit with his message. In the earlier years of the New Order, the Empire couldn't touch individuals like Princess Leia Organa because the galaxy loved her. Palpatine was still surprisingly beholden to the opinions and wishes of the elites on Coruscant and in the other core worlds. He still needed funding and business ties with large companies to create his empire. So what he had inherited was not a new empire, but just a galactic republic with an authoritarian ruler. All of the bureaucracy, all the low-level officials, a lot of the military officers were still the same. The Death Star was also an important part of the plan, and although many people saw it as a waste of resources and strategically vulnerable, another spoiler for Rise of Skywalker. You see, the Death Star wasn't the final product. It was a prototype. The final product was an entire fleet of Imperial-class Star Destroyers with a planet-killing laser attached to each one. This way, Palpatine had complete control over every world in the galaxy. This was known as his final order, and this was really his final plan. There were plenty of worlds that he just didn't want anymore. Now, during the waning moments of the Galactic Civil War and the Empire, there was plenty of chaos and confusion. Palpatine's contingency was created as a supposed final act. We were told that the point of this plan was to destroy and punish worlds for their failure to protect Palpatine. What it did instead was focus the entire attention of the New Republic on a last-ditch revenge attack on civilian targets, while the Imperial Remnant, the real Imperial Remnant, escaped beneath that cover. One last spoiler from Rise of Skywalker. This is the reason why the Sith fleet is all Imperial-class Star Destroyers from the Galactic Civil War period, and not a newer model, because most likely Palpatine hid that fleet in the latter days of his rule. This basically changes everything in the entire Skywalker saga, and as a pretty big fan of Emperor Palpatine, I'm surprised I didn't see this coming, because there's no individual in Star Wars that's more cunning and long-sighted than he is. I might not agree with a lot of the things he does. He is definitely evil, but one has to appreciate his ability to play the long game. Now, ultimately what happens is a whole nother discussion, but stay tuned, because me and American Ben are gonna sit down and have a very long chat about the rise of Skywalker. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.